In this lecture, we're looking at sovereignty as a concept, a very important concept when we talk about nation states and their composition and what makes nation states what they are, and be able to assert themselves within their territory and outside their territory as well. Now, we are looking at the types of sovereignty, right? So the types of sovereignty and the characteristics of sovereignty, right? So there are 5 main types of sovereignty and as well 5 types of characteristics. And it's very important for us to have this foundational knowledge of nation-state politics within the context of sovereignty and have that base understanding. Now, the first one is nominal or real sovereignty, and then legal sovereignty as well, while the term legal suggests some sort of process of a nation becoming sovereign. We're going to take a look at that. Political sovereignty, that also connotes some aspects of a process, a country gaining political sovereignty. What is that? What does that mean? We're going to take a look at popular sovereignty, and then de facto sovereignty, and de jure sovereignty. And then on this side, characteristics, we're looking at permanence, inalienable, right? Permanence, inalienable, imprescriptibility of sovereignty. We're also looking at the exclusiveness of sovereignty. Again, as the term suggests, exclusiveness, and doesn't include other components and other elements, and comprehensive sovereignty as well, the comprehensiveness of sovereignty. So this is what we're going to be covering in this lecture. All right, okay, let's take a closer look. So by way of definition then, we want to take a look at sovereignty and have a foundational understanding of what this concept means. It's a very important concept that plays out in nation states, that really establishes a nation state within the context of international law. So we want to understand what this means, and that understanding then will inform our discussions as we move on. All right, so sovereignty then is the right a nation has to self-govern. Now, let's take note of this. Now, this is a very important point. Now, let's pause for a minute and allow this to sink in. Sovereignty is the right a nation has to be self-governing. Now, the question is, what is self-governing? Now, from the term, we can, get a sense of what it means. Self means yourself, it's an individual, it will be you. But in this case, we're talking about the country, right? So the country then is governing itself. The country then is controlling, right? So controlling its affairs, right? And this is very important to note. It's controlling its affairs. No one else is doing that but the country. So it says such nation usually does not have any foreign powers. As a matter of fact, usually should come off because it shouldn't have any foreign powers governing parts or all of its territory. None whatsoever. The country is self-governing and is governing all of its territory. If this were to be its territory, it's not governing just 80% and allows somebody else to govern 20%. That's not sovereign. It is governing 100% of its territory. This is 100% of its territory. That's what it means, right? And this is what we refer to as territorial integrity. When we talk about nation-state politics, when we talk about nation-state sovereignty, international law, this is referred to as territorial integrity. A country has territorial integrity when that country is exercising 100% control of its territory. So here it says it is totally independent of any political entity, right? And here entity refers to any groups, refers to any organizations, any global or world bodies, right, such as maybe the UN, such as maybe the World Trade Organization, etc. It is independent of it. Although when we talk about the UN, of course, countries sign up onto treaties and so forth, and they are obligated to those treaties. That's different. But the UN should not be controlling any countries in terms of telling them what to do, how to run their affairs, how to establish the laws and enact the laws and interpret the laws, and to take control of their internal affairs. The UN should not be doing that. The World Trade Organization should not be doing that. IMF should not be doing that, etc. So the country has to be independent of any political entity, such as these: World Bank, IMF, etc. Right? So, for example, the United States, Germany, South Africa, Nigeria, and hundreds of countries around the world are exercising sovereignty. The United States is a very good example where it has, taken a clean break, right? Taking a clean break from Britain that colonized it. And today you will see, if you didn't know history, you would not know that the United States was once upon a time colonized by Britain, right? In terms of the culture is vastly different. The way they speak the English is vastly different from the way the British speak the English in terms of spelling and so forth. Even the drive, change the way they drive. They drive on the right side. The British are still driving on the left side. This is a perfect example of how a country breaks free and establishes its identity and becomes a sovereign nation without any linkage in terms of colonization to the country that colonized it. This is the definition of sovereignty, right? The right of a nation to be self-governing and making sure that no foreign powers, no political entities have a role in how it governs itself. This is known as self-determination. This is determination. Self-determination. A country has self-determination when it has full sovereignty. Or full sovereignty means self-determination. All right, let's move on to the other aspects now. So the first type of sovereignty is what is known as nominal or real sovereignty. Nominal or real sovereignty. And the question is, what is that? Well, let's take a closer look. So sovereignty is signified by the reign of monarchs, right? So let's highlight this. The reign of monarchs where the parliament is weak. In this particular scenario, the parliament is weak and the monarch takes advantage of it and exercises sovereignty, exercises control. And this was evident in England before the 15th century when the monarch was very powerful. Back then, the monarchs were very powerful in England and they had real control. They issued decrees and had absolute authority. And the parliament was really secondary to their power, right? So they exercised sovereignty. And this is known as nominal or real sovereignty. When the monarch takes control, right? So takes control and exercises real power, exercises authority, and the next type of sovereignty is legal sovereignty. And here we say the authority, right? Again, another key point here. The authority of the state is not questioned. This is the key word here. The authority, actually these are the key words. There's the first one, there's the second one. The authority of the state is not questioned, right? And it has legal powers to govern as it pleases. Another word here. So this is the third. Take note of these words. These are key words that really define this type of sovereignty. All right, so here the authority of the state is not questioned and it has legal power to govern as it pleases, And let's add no recourse, right? Is the final, this is no recourse, is the final arbiter in all matters concerning the state. That's it, right? It has supreme powers. And in all matters, and it enacts laws, interprets laws, and enforces laws. And this is really a very, very important type of sovereignty that a country exercises when they have sovereignty. They enact laws, they interpret those laws, they enforce those laws, and there is no recourse, right? Because it is a final arbiter. A very important category here, and we need to understand this because it's fundamental to the concept of sovereignty. Now, it says here, this type of sovereignty is where legal sovereignty is secondary to the will and power of the masses who hold the real power, right? Again, very important points being made here. Let's take a look at this a bit closely. This is the type of sovereignty where legal sovereignty, right, that was discussed previously, is secondary to the will and power of the masses. And then it goes on to say, the masses hold real power in that political space. Now, the question is, why do the masses hold the real power? Well, because they have the votes, right? They have the votes. They give the mandates, right? They give the mandates. They are the electorate that determine who gets power, right? They are the electorate that determines who gets power. That's why they're important. That's why they have real power, because they can determine the fate of the nation. It is based on the premise that the people are the essential of democracy and real power rests in the people, right? And political sovereignty, therefore, is held by the electorate, as we just said moments ago, and held by the electorate through the voting masses. So political sovereignty involves the people. Political sovereignty says that the people are the base. The people are the most important elements in this whole equation. And the people hold the power when it comes to giving mandates to leaders to exercise sovereignty. So popular sovereignty is a very interesting one as well. And this is similar to the previous one we just discussed, which is political sovereignty, in the sense that the public is supreme. The public, that is the people, right, are supreme and hold power. So the public is supreme and holds power, right? And this is known as the power of the masses, right? Again, this is a very key point and an underpinning of this whole concept of sovereignty, the role of the masses. And the masses are the ones that give really sovereignty through mandates and electorate and so forth, as we've seen with the different types of sovereignty. This is known as the power of the masses. It promotes universal voting rights, with one person, one vote ideology, right? So one person, this is one person equals to one vote, right? And that's the idea, that's the mindset, that's the ideology. And the people's representative in parliament on behalf of the people. So they vote in people into parliament, and those people uphold the sovereignty of the nation. And those people have the mandate through the electorate to do what they're doing in terms of protecting and asserting the sovereignty of that particular country. So this is really similar to the political sovereignty because of the people, right? They have income on the people, again, in the sense that the public is supreme and holds power. And this is where the masses play a key role through the promotion of voting rights, right? And this is where the masses play a key role. And this particular type promotes voting rights, universal voting rights, with the idea and concept of one person, one vote, and electing people into their parliament to act on their behalf and to protect their sovereignty and to assert their sovereignty. The next type of sovereignty is de facto and de jure sovereignty. This is very interesting terms here, and we want to understand what they mean. There are two sovereignties, right? Again, de facto and de jure sovereignty. Now, de jure is referring to the legal sovereignty. It's a legal term, and de facto, of course, is default. So the de facto sovereignty is where power rests, right? The real power rests with the de facto. So let's put that here. De facto sovereignty, that's where power rests in this type of sovereignty, with a ruler or a military officer who has taken power, overthrown the government, taking power forcefully, or somebody who's ruling by default. Perhaps is the son of the leader, and the leader has fallen ill, and the person has now taken over the country and is exercising sovereignty and power, etc. Right? That person would be the de facto leader. And because the person is a de facto leader, then the person has de facto sovereignty, right? But the real sovereignty, the de jure sovereignty, lies with the father, who is, was elected, perhaps came to power in some legitimate means, and for some reason is unable to exercise the duties of his position. And this is a perfect example of de facto and de jure sovereignty. All right. So, however, in spite of this power, the legal sovereignty is still intact. Right. So, in the example I gave, the father is the president. The son has taken over because father is indisposed. Father is ill for some reason. So the son now exercises, right, all of the powers. However, the father remains the legal sovereignty. All right, so the de facto becomes the actual sovereignty and the one that is obeyed, right? And it becomes the one that is obeyed, while the de jure is the legal sovereignty. This is a very important type of sovereignty that really, tells us the differences between the de facto and the de jure. And it's important to understand this because within this context and to look at it from this lens, because there are countries out there today that have de facto and de jure sovereignty, and some in the Middle East, some in Africa, and the list is long. And it's important to understand the distinction between the two. So now to the characteristics of sovereignty, we want to look at 5 main characteristics, beginning with permanence. And permanence here means continuity. This is permanence. It means continuity. And permanence means forever, right? We know that. Forever. Continuity, no interruptions. And unlimited status, right? So reigns over, right? Reigns over all. This is over all in that territory. No unlimited status. It is not sovereign in some parts and not sovereign in other parts. It's sovereign all across the land. That's what it means, right? So continuity, no interruption, and unlimited status. Now, the next one is inalienable or inalienability, right? Inalienability, which means that the country cannot cede land without self-destruction. Now, this is very powerful, and this is very instructive. The country cannot cede land without destroying itself. So here is the equation, right? So you cede land, right, equals to cede land over sovereignty. This is sovereignty equals to destruction, self-destruction. That's what it says. That's what it means, right? Self-destruction, right? And what does that mean? Really, it means that the minute a country cedes land, it has self-destruct. It has destroyed itself, essentially. Just like a man giving up himself to danger, that act of giving himself to danger means he's destroying himself. If a country allows its territory to be taken, or his territory is taken by force, that's self-destruction. And that's what this means. So it has an undisputed right to its territory, inalienable rights, right? God-given rights, so to speak, to its territory. And once it cedes that land, then it no longer becomes sovereign. It ceases to be sovereign and it is self-destruct. Now, the third one is the imprescriptibility. And here it means that the country must assert, it must exercise, right? Assert control, right? Exercise sovereignty. This is sovereignty, right? Over all that is in the land, right? That is in the territory. It must exercise control. Once it ceases to exercise control, non-assertion, non-exercise, it loses its sovereignty, right? So imprescriptibility is very, very important. Inalienability is very important as well. And permanence is very important as well. These are characteristics that must be present for us to say that a country has sovereignty. We're looking at these key elements. Does it have permanence? Does it have inalienable rights to all aspects of its land? Is there a piece of land that is being disputed? And is it imprescriptibility? Is there imprescriptibility? Is there imprescriptibility? Is it asserting its authority? Is it exercising its sovereignty? Very important points here. Exclusivity. When we talk about exclusivity, students, we are talking about the supreme power. That the country is exercising supreme power, no dispute of legality, right? So nobody is disputing his power, and his power is anchored on law, right? The legality is not disputed. This is law. And then here, it's comprehensive, extends to all territories, entities, and persons. No exemptions. Let's put that here. No exemptions here. None whatsoever. No exemptions here. It extends to all territories, entities, and persons. And everyone within the territory recognizes that, recognizes the power, and allows the sovereign nation to exist without dispute. That's what it means when we talk about sovereignty and the characteristics. These 5 points have to be present. They have to be part of the element and equation for us to determine the sovereignty, the true national sovereignty of a country. So in conclusion here, we have just discussed the different types and characteristics of sovereignty: nominal or real sovereignty, legal sovereignty, right? Political sovereignty, popular sovereignty, and de facto and de jure sovereignty. Very important types of sovereignty that make up the concept of sovereignty as we know it, that form the basis and the core of the ideal concept of sovereignty. Characteristics: how do you know sovereignty is in place? How do you know sovereignty is in place? Permanence, inalienability, imprescriptibility, exclusiveness, and comprehensiveness. These are the characteristics of sovereignty.